The words cut through the winter ballroom like a blade drawn in darkness. "You cannot possibly refuse me again, Miss Ashford. Society expects an announcement by Christmas." Lady Genevieve Ashford stood frozen before Lord Philip Thornton. Her gloved hands clenched so tightly that her nails bit through silk and into flesh. Around them, the December ball swirled with music and candlelight and the brittle gaiety of London's finest families. No one seemed to notice that she was drowning. "I have not refused you, my lord," she managed, her voice steady despite the panic clawing at her throat. "I have merely asked for time to consider." "Time?" Philip's handsome face hardened with displeasure. "We have been engaged for 3 months. Your father has given his blessing. The contracts are being drawn. What more consideration could you possibly require?" The answer burned in Genevieve's chest, desperate and damning. "I do not love you. I do not even like you, and I would rather die alone than spend my life as your possession." But she could not speak those words. Not here. Not ever. For she had made a terrible mistake in her loneliness and grief, and now she was trapped. 6 months earlier, Lady Genevieve Ashford had been happy. She had been 24 years old, content with her independent life as the daughter of the Earl of Whitmore, residing in the family's comfortable London townhouse with her widowed father. She had devoted her days to her true passion, music. Her compositions were whispered about in certain circles as extraordinary, though society expected ladies to play pretty songs, not create them. Then her father had fallen ill with a wasting sickness that left him bedridden and diminished, and in his weakness, he had done something Genevieve would never have believed possible. He had promised her hand to Lord Philip Thornton. Philip was everything society valued in a gentleman. Wealthy, titled as a viscount with prospects of an earldom, handsome in that golden, effortless way that drew every eye. He had approached the Earl during a moment of particular suffering, offering to settle certain debts, to ensure the family's comfort, to protect Genevieve when her father was gone. And the Earl, terrified of leaving his daughter alone and vulnerable, had accepted. By the time Genevieve learned of the arrangement, it was already known throughout the ton. Congratulations arrived daily. Her father looked at her with such relieved gratitude that she could not bear to shatter his peace. And Philip began calling with increasing frequency, his charm wearing thinner with each visit, revealing something cold and possessive beneath. He did not ask about her music. He informed her she would cease composing after marriage, as it was unseemly for a viscountess to engage in such pursuits. He did not inquire about her thoughts or feelings. He told her what she would wear, where she would go, how she would conduct herself as his wife. He did not court her. He claimed her as though she were a prize already won. And Genevieve, trapped between duty to her dying father and her own desperate unhappiness, felt the walls of her future closing in with every passing day. The December ball where Philip had cornered her was meant to be the final step before their formal engagement announcement at Christmas. 1 more month, and she would belong to him entirely, unless she could find a way to escape. Genevieve fled the ballroom the moment Philip turned to greet an acquaintance, her ivory silk gown whispering against marble as she sought refuge in the shadows of the host's conservatory. The glass-walled room was blissfully empty, illuminated only by moonlight filtering through winter clouds. She pressed her hands against the cool glass, gulping air that tasted of greenery and freedom, trying to still the frantic beating of her heart. Running from something, or toward something. The deep voice from the shadows startled her so completely that she whirled, one hand flying to her throat. A man stood half-concealed behind a towering fern, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in evening blacks that seemed to absorb what little light reached him. As he stepped forward, Genevieve's breath caught. This was no ordinary gentleman. Alexander Hawthorne, Duke of Ravenscroft, was a name spoken with a peculiar mixture of respect and wariness throughout society. At 35, he commanded one of the largest fortunes in England, wielded considerable political influence, and maintained a reputation for brilliant ruthlessness in both business and social matters. He was also devastatingly handsome in a way that seemed almost dangerous, sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw, dark hair that fell slightly too long, and eyes of such pale gray they seemed to see directly through pretense to truth. But it was not his appearance that made society wary. It was his absolute disinterest in their games. The Duke attended balls rarely and departed early. He refused invitations to house parties, ignored ambitious mothers, and showed no interest whatsoever in marriage. Rumor claimed his heart had been broken years ago by a great love lost, though no one knew the details. What was certain was that Alexander Hawthorne kept the world at a careful distance. "Your Grace," Genevieve managed a curtsy, her composure returning despite her racing pulse. "Forgive me. I did not realize anyone else sought refuge here. Yet we both did." He moved closer, and she caught the subtle scent of sandalwood and winter air, which suggests we are fleeing similar things. Let me guess, the suffocating expectations of society? Meaningless conversations? The feeling that you are performing a role rather than living a life. The accuracy of his words struck something deep within her. "You speak from experience, Your Grace. I speak from exhaustion." A slight smile curved his mouth, transforming his severe features. "I have spent the better part of a decade avoiding precisely these situations. Yet here I am, cornered by duty into attending yet another ball where everyone wants something from me. What do they want? My money, my influence. My name is attached to their daughters or their schemes." He studied her with those penetrating eyes. "And you? What are you running from, Lady?" "Ashford. Lady Genevieve Ashford." She hesitated, then decided honesty was a luxury she could afford with a stranger she would likely never speak with again. "I am running from my impending engagement to a man I do not love, announced in a month's time, and from which I can see no escape without destroying my father's last hopes for my security." Something flickered in the Duke's expression, recognition, perhaps, or sympathy. A marriage of obligation. How thoroughly unoriginal of society to force yet another unwilling woman into such an arrangement. "You disapprove?" "I disapprove of the practice of treating women as property to be traded for financial security or social advancement." He spoke with quiet intensity. "I disapprove of parents who sacrifice their daughters' happiness for their own peace of mind. I disapprove of men who claim women as prizes rather than cherishing them as partners." Genevieve found herself staring at this unexpected man who spoke such radical truths in the shadows of a conservatory. "You are not like other gentlemen, Your Grace." "No," he agreed simply. "I am not, which is why I avoid them whenever possible." They stood in companionable silence, two refugees from the bright falseness beyond the glass walls. Genevieve felt something loosening in her chest, the constant tension that had gripped her since learning of her father's promise. "Why did you come tonight?" she asked softly. "If you find these gatherings so unbearable?" The Duke's expression grew guarded. "My younger sister Margaret is to be presented this season. She insisted I attend at least one ball to demonstrate that I am not, as she charmingly puts it, a complete hermit who will embarrass her by association." Despite everything, Genevieve laughed. "I like your sister already. She would like you as well. Margaret has strong opinions about women being forced into unwanted marriages." He paused, then spoke with careful deliberation. "Lady Genevieve, we have only just met, and you have no reason to trust me. But I find myself wanting to offer something that may seem presumptuous." "Which is?" "A distraction, a reprieve." He met her gaze directly. "If you need to delay this engagement, if you need time to find another path, I could provide interference." Genevieve's heart began to race for an entirely different reason. What manner of interference? "The most effective kind, rival interest. If society believed I was courting you, your Viscount would be forced to step back or risk social humiliation by pressing his claim against a duke. It would buy you time. Perhaps enough time for your father's health to improve, for you to speak honestly with him about your feelings." "You would do this?" Genevieve whispered. "For a stranger? I would do it for a woman who deserves better than what fate has dealt her." His pale eyes held hers. "And perhaps also because I am weary of being hounded by matchmaking mamas, and a false courtship would grant me peace as well. We would both benefit from the arrangement." It was mad. It was impossible. It was the answer to prayers she had been too frightened to speak aloud. "What would you require in return?" Genevieve asked, her practical mind asserting itself despite the wild hope blooming in her chest. Only what I have stated, that society believes we are developing and understanding. We would attend certain events together. I would call upon you. We would be seen in each other's company with increasing frequency. He paused. And when the season ends, or when you have found a way out of your predicament, we would part amicably with some polite excuse about incompatibility. That is all. That is all. He extended his hand, formal despite their strange conversation. Do we have an agreement, Lady Genevieve? She looked at his outstretched hand, at the escape it represented, at the dangerous stranger offering salvation without apparent price. Every instinct of caution warned her not to trust this. Yet every instinct of survival urged her to grasp this lifeline before it vanished. We have an agreement, Your Grace, she said, placing her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, and something passed between them. A current of recognition that made her pulse quicken and her breath catch. The Duke felt it too. She saw it in the slight widening of his eyes, the way his grip tightened almost imperceptibly before he released her. We should return separately, he said, his voice slightly rougher than before. I shall call upon you tomorrow afternoon. We can discuss the particulars then. Tomorrow, Genevieve agreed, still feeling the ghost of his touch against her palm. She watched him leave the conservatory, his tall frame disappearing into the shadows beyond the glass walls. Only when she was alone did she realize she was trembling. Not with fear, with something far more dangerous. The Duke of Ravencroft called at the Whitmore townhouse precisely at 3 o'clock the following afternoon, causing a minor sensation among the servants who rushed to prepare the drawing room for such an august visitor. Genevieve's father, too weak to leave his chambers, sent word that the Duke was most welcome and that Genevieve should receive him with their housekeeper Mrs. Winters in attendance for propriety's sake. When Alexander entered the modest drawing room, he brought with him an immediate sense of command that made the space feel smaller, more intimate. He bowed over Genevieve's hand with perfect courtesy, though she noticed the way his eyes lingered on her face, searching. Lady Genevieve, I trust you had no regrets about our conversation last night. None, Your Grace. She gestured to the chair opposite hers. Though I confess I spent much of the night wondering if I had dreamed the entire encounter. A mutual sensation. He settled into the chair with unconscious grace. I do not make a habit of proposing outlandish schemes to ladies I have just met. Nor do I make a habit of accepting them. Genevieve poured tea with hands that remained admirably steady. Yet here we are. They discussed the practicalities of their arrangement with the same businesslike efficiency they might apply to any contract. They would be seen together at no fewer than 3 social events per week. The Duke would send flowers daily, as any proper suitor would. He would request permission to escort her to the theater, to drive in Hyde Park, to attend the Fenwick musical. Musicale? The Duke raised an eyebrow. I confess I had hoped to avoid such tedium. You disapprove of music, Your Grace? I disapprove of the torture inflicted upon innocent audiences by young ladies who have been forced to learn instruments they have no talent for or interest in playing. He spoke with such dry wit that Genevieve laughed despite herself. I have heard Miss Pemberton's piano. I would not wish that suffering upon anyone. Then I shall ensure we arrive fashionably late and depart unfashionably early, Genevieve promised. Though I confess, I love music myself. It is my great passion. Do you play? I compose. The Duke's expression shifted to genuine interest, the first time she had seen such unguarded curiosity in his face. You compose? Not merely play pretty songs for drawing-room entertainment, but actually create music. I do. Genevieve felt warmth flood her cheeks. Though it is not something I speak of often. Society finds it peculiar that a woman should aspire to more than adequate performance of established pieces. Society, the Duke said with quiet intensity, is populated largely by fools who cannot distinguish between convention and wisdom. Over the next hour, their conversation ranged far beyond the logistics of their false courtship. They discovered shared opinions on literature. Both preferred the philosophical to the purely romantic. They debated the political implications of recent parliamentary votes. They discussed the obligations of title and wealth with a candor that suggested neither took their positions lightly. "You care deeply about your tenants," Genevieve observed, after the Duke described improvements he had funded for workers' housing on his estates. "I care about treating people with basic human dignity," he corrected. "A concept that seems radical only because so many of my peers view those beneath them in station as something less than fully human." When the Duke finally rose to depart, having stayed far longer than propriety strictly allowed, he paused at the door. "Lady Genevieve, I want to be absolutely clear about something." His pale eyes held hers with uncomfortable intensity. "This arrangement is for your protection and benefit. If at any point you become uncomfortable, if I overstep in any way, you need only say so and it ends immediately. I do not wish to become another man making demands of you." The consideration in his words, the genuine concern in his face, struck something deep in Genevieve's carefully guarded heart. "Thank you, Your Grace. That means more than you know." After he left, Mrs. Winters could not stop talking about what a fine gentleman the Duke was. So proper and respectful. And wasn't Lady Genevieve fortunate to have caught his eye? Genevieve said nothing, but that night she lay awake remembering the sound of his voice, the rare smile that had transformed his severe features, the way he had spoken about her music as though it mattered. This was supposed to be a pretense, a convenient fiction to grant her breathing room. So why did her heart race every time she thought of seeing him again? The following week unfolded in a carefully orchestrated display of courtship that sent London society into paroxysms of speculation and gossip. The Duke of Ravenscroft, that most elusive of prizes, was courting Lady Genevieve Ashford with an attentiveness that bordered on the unprecedented. Flowers arrived daily at the Whitmore townhouse, not ostentatious bouquets designed for show, but thoughtful arrangements that revealed careful attention. Winter roses in shades of cream and blush, branches of flowering quince that filled rooms with subtle fragrance, delicate narcissus that spoke of new beginnings. Each arrangement included a note in the Duke's distinctive hand, and Genevieve found herself treasuring these small messages far more than wisdom dictated. "For a composer who creates beauty, may these blooms inspire your work. I saw these and thought of your laugh yesterday in the park. Bright and unexpected. Margaret insists I am being insufficiently romantic. I countered that you would prefer honesty to pretty lies. Was I correct?" Their public appearances together created exactly the sensation Alexander had predicted. When they drove through Hyde Park in his magnificent carriage, conversations ceased as they passed. When he escorted her to the opera, seated in his private box, every opera glass in the theater turned their direction rather than toward the stage. And when Lord Philip Thornton attempted to approach Genevieve at a soirée, only to find the Duke of Ravenscroft materialize at her side with a look of such cold dismissal that Philip retreated without speaking, the tongue buzzed with delighted speculation for days. "You have made an enemy?" Genevieve murmured as they stood together at the edge of the Hardington ballroom, watching Philip glower at them from across the crowded space. "He was already your enemy," Alexander replied quietly. "I have merely made him aware that you are no longer unprotected." The words sent warmth flooding through her chest. "You take our arrangement seriously." "I take you seriously, Genevieve." It was the first time he had used her Christian name, and the intimacy of it made her breath catch. When she looked up at him, she found his pale eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made the crowded ballroom fade away. "Would you?" He paused, seeming almost uncertain. "Would you play something for me?" "What?" "Your compositions. I have been thinking about what you said about music being your passion. I would very much like to hear what you create." No one had ever asked. Not her father, who loved her but saw her music as an eccentricity to be indulged. Not Philip, who had forbidden it outright. Not any of the acquaintances who thought ladies played for amusement. Not Art. Now, Genevieve's voice came out barely above a whisper. "If you are willing." The Hardingtons' music room was blessedly empty when they slipped away from the ball, leaving Mrs. Winters to maintain propriety's illusion by keeping watch from the doorway. The room held a beautiful piano, and Genevieve approached it with trembling hands. She had not played for anyone in months. Not since Philip had made clear such pursuits would cease upon their marriage. "I am not practiced," she said softly, settling onto the bench. "It has been some time since. Just play, Genevieve, however it comes." She placed her fingers on the keys and let the music flow. It was a piece she had composed during the darkest days after her father's illness began, full of longing and loss, but also defiance and hope. Her hands knew the notes by heart, and as she played, she forgot the Duke was watching, forgot the ball beyond the closed doors, forgot everything except the music itself. When the final note faded into silence, Genevieve sat very still, almost afraid to look at Alexander's reaction. Extraordinary. His voice was rough with emotion. She turned to find him standing directly behind the piano bench, his face transformed by something that looked almost like reverence. "It is only a small piece," she said, suddenly shy. "Nothing compared to the great composers." "It is art," Alexander interrupted firmly. "Real art, born from genuine feeling and considerable talent. Genevieve, you should be studying with masters, publishing your work, not hiding this gift as though it were something shameful." Tears burned behind her eyes. "Society would never allow. Society is not the arbiter of your worth." He moved to sit beside her on the bench, and she was suddenly, acutely aware of his proximity, the warmth radiating from his body, the way his sleeve brushed against hers. "Promise me something." "What?" "Do not let anyone silence this. Not Philip Thornton. Not societal expectation. Not even your father's well-meant concerns." His hand covered hers on the keys, and the contact sent electricity racing up her arm. "The world has too few truly beautiful things. Do not deprive it of your music." Genevieve looked at their joined hands, at the Duke's face so close to hers, and felt something shift fundamentally in her chest. This was no longer a pretense. This was real, and that terrified her more than any forced engagement ever could. The letter arrived on a gray December morning, 10 days after the Duke first called at the Whitmore townhouse. Genevieve recognized the handwriting immediately. Philip's bold, aggressive script that matched his personality perfectly. She opened it with trembling fingers, already knowing it would contain nothing good. "Lady Genevieve, I have been patient with your sudden distraction, assuming it to be nothing more than a young woman's last flutter of independence before accepting the inevitability of marriage. But I will not be made a fool. The Duke of Ravenscroft is known throughout society as a man who has no interest in matrimony. Whatever game you are playing by encouraging his attention, it ends now. I have spoken with your father. He confirms that our understanding remains in place and that he expects you to honor the commitment he made on your behalf. You will announce our engagement at Christmas, as planned, and you will cease all contact with the Duke immediately, or I shall be forced to take actions that will reflect poorly upon your family's reputation and your father's declining health. Do not test me on this matter. Yours, Philip Thornton." The threat was clear. Philip knew her father was too weak to withstand scandal or stress. He was gambling, correctly, that Genevieve would sacrifice herself rather than risk her father's life. She was still holding the letter when Alexander was announced, arriving for their scheduled drive in Hyde Park. One look at her face and he dismissed Mrs. Winters with a curtness that would have shocked society, crossing the drawing room to take Genevieve's hands in his. "What has happened?" She showed him the letter wordlessly. Alexander read it with an expression that grew progressively darker. When he finally looked up, his pale eyes blazed with cold fury that would have terrified her if it had been directed at her rather than on her behalf. "He threatens you." "He threatens my father," Genevieve corrected, her voice shaking, "which is far more effective. You cannot possibly intend to honor this ultimatum." "I have no choice." The words tasted like ash. "My father is dying, Your Grace. I will not hasten his death by causing scandal or distress. And our arrangement was always temporary." "Was it?" Alexander's voice cut like a blade. "Be honest, Genevieve. Was this truly nothing but convenience to you?" The question hung between them, weighted with everything they had both been carefully not saying. "What does it matter?" Genevieve pulled her hands free, turning away so he would not see the tears threatening to spill. You said to yourself this would end when the season concluded. You wanted a distraction from matchmaking mamas. I needed time to find an escape. We have both gotten what we wanted. Have we? The gentleness in his voice undid her. Genevieve pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting for composure. I cannot marry Philip. I cannot marry a man who would threaten my father to force my compliance, who would silence everything that makes me myself. I would rather. Her voice broke. Alexander was behind her in an instant, his hands on her shoulders, turning her to face him with careful gentleness. Then do not. He spoke with quiet intensity. Marry me instead. The words hung in the air between them, impossible and perfect. What? Genevieve whispered. Marry me? Alexander repeated, his pale eyes holding hers with unwavering directness. Not as an arrangement, not as a pretense, as a real marriage if you will have me. But you do not want. I want you. The admission seemed torn from him. I have wanted you since that first night in the conservatory, though I told myself it was only attraction, only sympathy for your plight. I convinced myself I was being noble, offering protection without entanglement. His hands framed her face with infinite tenderness. But these past weeks, Genevieve, learning who you are, hearing your music, watching your mind work, seeing the way you face the world with courage and grace despite everything that has been demanded of you. I am not being noble anymore. I am being selfish. How is this selfish? Because I am asking you to marry me knowing that I am offering you a far more complicated life than you would have with any other man. His voice roughened with emotion he was clearly struggling to contain. I am difficult. I am demanding. I have no patience for social nonsense and little talent for the pretty speeches other men make so easily. I can promise you fidelity and respect and a partnership based on mutual regard, but I do not know if I can promise the romantic love you deserve. Genevieve felt tears spilling down her cheeks as she reached up to cover his hands with her own. You foolish man, she whispered. Do you truly not know? Know what? That you have shown me more genuine care in these few weeks than Philip did in months of supposed courtship? That your honesty is worth 1,000 pretty speeches? That you have respected my music, my mind, my autonomy in ways no other man ever has. She took a shuddering breath. Alexander, I am in love with you. I think I have been since that first night, though I told myself it was impossible, that you could never feel the same. You spoke of being selfish. I have been selfish too, treasuring every moment with you while pretending it was only an arrangement, terrified you would see through my pretense and... He kissed her. It was not gentle or tentative. It was claiming and desperate and full of all the emotions they had both been suppressing for weeks. His arms came around her, pulling her against him as though he feared she might vanish if he loosened his grip, and Genevieve surrendered to the kiss with a completeness that shocked her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said, the words rough but certain. I am terrified of it. I have spent years avoiding exactly this kind of vulnerability. But I love you, Genevieve Ashford, and I will not let Philip Thornton or anyone else take you from me. What do we do? Genevieve whispered. My father. Leave your father to me. Alexander's voice hardened with determination. I will speak with him today. I will make clear that you are under my protection now, and that any man who would threaten you to force compliance is unworthy of your hand regardless of prior arrangements. He will worry about the scandal. There will be no scandal. Alexander pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. We will marry by special license within the week, before Philip can spread whatever poison he has prepared. Your father will see you safely wed to a duke who adores you. And Philip Thornton will learn that threatening a Duchess of Ravencroft is a far more dangerous gambit than threatening an unprotected earl's daughter. Despite everything, Genevieve felt a smile tugging at her lips. You are rather frightening when you wish to be your grace. Only to those who deserve it. His expression softened. With you, I intend to be nothing but gentle, though I may occasionally be maddening. Fair warning. I believe I can manage maddening. She reached up to touch his face, still marveling that she was allowed this intimacy. As long as it comes with honesty and music and your impossible standards that somehow make me want to be better than I thought I could be. Alexander kissed her again, softer this time, full of promise rather than desperation. Marry me, Genevieve, not as an escape from Philip, not as protection or arrangement. Marry me because you love me and because I love you more than I knew it was possible to love anyone. Yes, Genevieve breathed against his lips. Yes, Alexander, I will marry you. The Duke of Ravenscroft did not believe in half measures. Within an hour of leaving the Whitmore townhouse, he had obtained a special license through his considerable influence with the Archbishop. By evening, he had arranged a private meeting with the Earl of Whitmore, bringing his personal physician to examine the ailing Earl and recommend treatments that might ease his suffering. And when Lord Philip Thornton arrived at the Whitmore residence the following morning, fully prepared to assert his claim and demand Genevieve's compliance with their understanding, he found himself facing not a frightened young woman, but the full wrath of one of England's most powerful dukes. The confrontation took place in the Earl's drawing room, with the Earl himself present despite his weakness, determined to witness his daughter's fate. Philip entered with the confidence of a man who believed victory assured, only to stop short when he saw Alexander standing beside Genevieve's chair like a sentinel. "Your Grace," Philip said with false courtesy, "I did not realize you would be present for this family matter." "Lady Genevieve is under my protection now," Alexander replied with icy precision, "which makes any matter concerning her very much my concern." "I'm afraid you have been misled by a young woman's temporary infatuation," Philip said with a condescending smile that made Genevieve's hands clench. "Lady Genevieve and I have an understanding approved by her father. Whatever amusement she has found in your attention must now end so that she can honor her obligations." "There is no understanding." The Earl's weak voice carried surprising authority. "I may have made promises while addled by pain and fear, Lord Thornton, but I rescind them now. My daughter will not be forced into a marriage that makes her miserable." Philip's face flushed with anger. "You cannot simply break your word." "I can and I do." The Earl sat straighter despite obvious pain. "The Duke has made clear to me the nature of your courtship, the threats, the demands, the complete disregard for my daughter's happiness. No father worthy of the name would bind his child to such a man. This is absurd." Philip's charm cracked completely, revealing the ugly entitlement beneath. "She is nothing without this marriage. No fortune, no prospects beyond being a spinster caring for her dying father. I offered her security and position, and she repays me by whoring herself to a duke for better terms." Alexander moved so quickly that Philip barely had time to register the danger before finding himself slammed against the wall, the duke's forearm across his throat. "Choose your next words very carefully," Alexander said with deadly calm. "You have just insulted the woman I intend to marry. Apologize now, or I will ensure that no respectable house in England will receive you." "You cannot be serious," Philip choked. "You do not want marriage. Everyone knows. Everyone knows I have avoided marriage to women who sought my title and fortune while caring nothing for me as a person." Alexander's pale eyes were chips of ice. "Lady Genevieve is not such a woman. She is brilliant and talented and brave, and she has agreed to be my wife despite knowing all my considerable flaws. I count myself the most fortunate man in England." He released Philip, who staggered backward, his face mottled with rage and humiliation. "Lady Genevieve and I will be married by week's weekend," Alexander continued. "You will not approach her again. You will not speak her name in any context that is less than respectful. And if I hear even a whisper of scandal connected to her reputation, I will use every ounce of my influence to destroy whatever remains of yours. Am I perfectly clear?" Philip looked between Alexander and Genevieve, clearly searching for some crack in their united front, some weakness to exploit. He found none. "You will regret this," he said finally, directing his venom at Genevieve. "When you tire of pretending to care for each other, when the arrangement sours as these things always do. Get out," Alexander said quietly. "Before I forget, I am a gentleman." Philip fled, and silence fell over the drawing room. Then the Earl began to laugh. A weak, breathless sound, but genuine. "That was the most satisfying thing I have witnessed in months," he said, reaching for Genevieve's hand. "My dear girl, are you certain about this man? He is rather terrifying." "Only to those who deserve it, father," Genevieve replied, squeezing his hand. "To me, he has been nothing but kind." "Then you have my blessing, daughter, and my profound gratitude, your grace, for seeing her value when I nearly failed to protect it." Alexander bowed with genuine respect. "You did what you thought necessary to secure your daughter's future, my lord. That is the action of a loving father. I simply have the means to offer her a better one." The wedding took place 3 days later in the Ravenscroft family chapel, a beautiful stone building on the Duke's country estate just outside London. It was a small gathering, the Earl carried in a chair because he was too weak to stand throughout the ceremony. Margaret, Alexander's sister, who wept happy tears and declared Genevieve exactly the woman her impossible brother needed. Mrs. Winters and a handful of trusted servants. Genevieve wore a gown of ivory silk that the Duke had commissioned with startling speed, simple in design but exquisite in execution. Margaret had woven winter roses into her hair, and the Earl had given her their mother's pearls to wear at her throat. But it was the expression on Alexander's face when she walked down the aisle that stole her breath. He looked at her as though she were a miracle he had given up hoping for, wonder and love and gratitude mixing in those pale eyes that had seemed so cold when she first met him. When the vicar asked if he would take this woman, Alexander's voice rang clear and certain through the chapel. "I will. With my whole heart, I will." And when Genevieve spoke her own vows, promising to love and honor and cherish this complicated, brilliant, impossibly dear man, she meant every word with a fierceness that surprised her. The kiss Alexander gave her after they were pronounced husband and wife was tender and reverent and full of promise. A claiming, yes, but also a surrender. They belonged to each other now, freely chosen rather than forced. At the wedding breakfast that followed, Margaret pulled Genevieve aside with a knowing smile. "I have never seen my brother like this," she confided. "Happy, unguarded. He has spent so many years holding the world at distance. You changed that." "He changed me as well," Genevieve replied softly. "I was drowning in expectation and duty. He reminded me that I could breathe." "Love each other well," Margaret said, squeezing her hand. "Both of you deserve it." The Duke and Duchess of Ravenscroft returned to London the following week to face society as a married couple, and the town's reaction was precisely what Alexander had predicted: shock, speculation, and grudging admiration that the elusive Duke had finally been captured. Their first appearance together was at a musical hosted by Lady Pemberton, and Genevieve felt the weight of every curious gaze as they entered the drawing room. But Alexander's hand was warm and steady at the small of her back, and his presence beside her transformed anxiety into confidence. Lady Pemberton fluttered over immediately, barely concealing her avid curiosity behind a veneer of congratulations. Your Grace," she trilled. "What a delightful surprise. We had heard rumors, of course, but married so quickly. Quite the whirlwind romance. When one knows," Alexander said with calm finality, "delays become pointless. I am fortunate Lady Genevieve agreed to have me." "You are too modest, Your Grace," Lady Pemberton tittered. "I am sure every young lady in London would have been thrilled." "No," Alexander interrupted with quiet intensity, his eyes on Genevieve's face. "Not every young lady composes music that makes the world more beautiful. Not every young lady has the courage to face down social pressure with grace. Not every young lady is Genevieve." The room had fallen silent, everyone straining to hear their conversation. Lady Pemberton's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "Well," she finally managed, "how lovely. Your Grace, I don't suppose the Duchess would honor us with a performance? We so rarely hear anything truly accomplished." Genevieve felt Alexander stiffen beside her, preparing to refuse on her behalf, but she laid a gentle hand on his arm. "I would be delighted, Lady Pemberton," she said clearly, "if you do not mind hearing an original composition rather than one of the standard pieces." Lady Pemberton looked uncertain, but could hardly refuse without seeming rude. An original? How unusual. Well, please do proceed. The assembled guests settled into expectant silence as Genevieve approached the piano. She caught Alexander's eye and saw the question there. Was she certain? She was. This was her music, her passion, her gift, and she would no longer hide it to make others comfortable. The piece she played was new, composed during their brief courtship. A love story told in notes and harmonies, beginning in darkness and loneliness, building through discovery and hope, and resolving in something that sounded like sunrise. As her hands moved across the keys, Genevieve forgot the watching crowd, forgot everything except the music itself and the man whose love had freed her to share it. When the final chord faded into silence, the room remained utterly still for a long moment. Then Alexander began to applaud, a slow, deliberate sound that built as others joined in. And when Genevieve looked up, she saw tears on several faces, saw Lady Pemberton dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, and saw something like awe in the expressions around her. Extraordinary, someone murmured. Absolutely extraordinary, another agreed. Alexander was beside her before she could fully rise from the bench, offering his hand and then keeping hold of hers as he addressed the room. My wife, he said with quiet pride, is a composer of considerable talent. I intend to ensure her work is heard by those who can appreciate it properly, not as drawing-room entertainment, but as the serious art it is. The statement sent ripples through the assembled guests. A duke acknowledging his wife's artistic pursuits, supporting rather than suppressing them. It was unprecedented. It was perfect. That night, in the music room of Ravencroft House, a beautiful space Alexander had ordered prepared for her as a wedding gift, Genevieve played for her husband again. Not for an audience, just for them. Alexander sat in the chair beside the piano, his pale eyes never leaving her face, and when she finished, he drew her into his arms with tender reverence. Thank you, he murmured against her hair. For what? For trusting me enough to be honest. For believing I could be more than the cold monument society had decided I was. For loving me despite every reason not to. Genevieve pulled back to look at him, her hands framing his beloved face. I love you because of who you are, Alexander. Not despite it. Your honesty, your integrity, the way you see people's value rather than just their utility. The way you defended me when I could not defend myself. I will always defend you, he promised. Always protect you. Always believe in your music and your worth. I know, she kissed him softly. Just as I will always stand beside you, impossible standards and all. They stood together in the music room as the candles burned low, and Genevieve understood with complete clarity that she had been wrong about one thing. This had never been about escape or distraction or convenient arrangements. From that first night in the conservatory, from the moment Alexander had looked at her and truly seen her, this had been about love. The most frightening, beautiful, transformative kind of love. The kind that demanded honesty and vulnerability and the courage to trust another person with the most fragile parts of yourself. She had needed an escape from her engagement. Alexander had needed a distraction from society's demands. But what they had found was infinitely more precious than either had sought. They had found each other. The Ravencroft Music Room had become famous throughout London. Every month, the Duke and Duchess hosted salons where serious musicians gathered to share their work. Not the simpering performances of debutantes seeking husbands, but genuine artists exploring their craft. Genevieve's own compositions had been published under her full name, Genevieve Hawthorne, Duchess of Ravencroft, and had received critical acclaim from musicians far more accomplished than she had ever dared to hope. She was working on a new piece when Alexander entered the music room that winter afternoon, and the sight that greeted him made him stop in the doorway, his heart swelling with such profound love that he had to pause to steady himself. Genevieve sat at the pianoforte, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, one hand on the keys and the other resting on her rounded belly where their first child grew. She looked up with a smile that still had the power to steal his breath. You're home early. I could not stay away. He crossed to her, kneeling beside the bench to press a kiss to her stomach. How is our small composer today? Active. Genevieve laughed as the baby kicked under his hand. I think she already has opinions about tempo. She or he. Either way, this child will be musical. I can feel it. Alexander looked up at his wife's face, at the joy and peace that had replaced the trapped desperation he had first seen in her, and sent a silent prayer of gratitude to whatever fate had led them both to that conservatory 2 years ago. I received a letter today, he said, pulling it from his pocket. From Philip Thornton. Genevieve's expression grew wary. What did he want? To apologize, apparently. His marriage has ended in separation. His wife's family controls all the money, and she has grown tired of his gambling and his temper. Alexander's voice was carefully neutral. He says he understands now what he lost when he tried to force your compliance rather than earning your affection. Do you believe him? I believe he is capable of regret without being capable of change. Alexander set the letter aside and took both her hands. But it does not matter. He is part of a past we have both moved beyond. Yes, Genevieve agreed softly. We have. She played for him then the new composition she had been working on. It was different from her earlier pieces, full of warmth and hope and the complex joy of love that had been tested and proven true. When she finished, Alexander pulled her into his arms, careful of her growing belly, and held her with the tenderness that had become his defining characteristic where she was concerned. I love you, he said, as he said every day, more than I knew it was possible to love anyone. I love you too, Genevieve replied, as she always did. My impossible, wonderful Duke who saved me from myself. We saved each other, Alexander corrected. That is what love does. Outside, snow began to fall over London, blanketing the city in white. Inside Ravencroft House, in the warm music room that had become the heart of their home, a duke and his duchess held each other close and planned the future they would build together. A future filled with music and laughter and the children they would raise to value honesty over convention, courage over comfort, and love, the real, complicated, beautiful kind, over everything else. She had needed an escape from her engagement. He had needed a distraction from society's expectations. But one of them had been hiding love all along. And in the end, that hidden love had transformed two lonely souls into partners, into best friends, into the kind of husband and wife that made others believe in the possibility of happiness. Not because their life was perfect or easy, but because they had chosen each other freely, loved each other honestly, and never stopped fighting for the beautiful, imperfect, extraordinary life they had built together.